Hey, how are we? Our learning target for this video is I can factor trinomials when a equals 1. Let's talk about what a trinomial is first. So a trinomial is basically a polynomial made up of 3 terms. So that's why you got the tri in there. Anytime you see that prefix tri, you're thinking of 3. And what you're looking at here is the standard form of a trinomial. So usually when you see a trinomial, they'll be in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's look at an example of a trinomial. X squared plus 8x plus 15. You'll notice that we have these 3 letters, A, B, and C, in the standard form of a trinomial. A is the coefficient of the x squared. B is the coefficient of x, and C is just the constant, the number without the variable. So if we look at this trinomial, A would be 1, because 1 is the coefficient of x squared. Remember, there's that invisible 1 there. B would be 8, because it's the coefficient of x, and C would be 15. Okay, so that's just pretty much just gave you the standard form of a trinomial, and I just showed you how to identify A, B, and C. Let's talk about how to factor a trinomial. Now remember, factoring is undoing a multiplication. So let me give you the steps for factoring a trinomial, because there's a special way to factor these. Okay, you can't use GCF here because there is not a common factor that goes into all these 3 terms. So we can't use GCF here, all right? There's a different way of factoring. And I'm going to give you the steps. They're right here. And the first step says to set up 2 sets of parentheses. Let's go ahead and do that. So there's my 2 sets of parentheses, and write x as the first term for each one. So this only applies when A equals 1, all right? Step 2, find the factors of C that add up to B and place them in the parentheses. And here's what I mean, right? You remember, C is this 15, and B is the 8. You need to find the factors of C that add up to B. In other words, you need to find the numbers that multiply to 15. So they have to multiply to 15. Factors implies multiplication, and they have to add up to 8. And there's only one unique combination of numbers that can do that. So let's think of the numbers that multiply to 15. 1 times 15, or 15 times 1, same thing, so I don't have to write that over. And we got 3 and 5, or 5 times 3, which is the same as 3 times 5, so I don't have to write it twice. Which one of these combinations multiplies to 15, but also adds up to 8? Well, not these. These don't add up to 8, but these do. So I'm going to use 3 and 5. So these 2 numbers, like I just said, right, they add up to 8 and they multiply to 15. They're both positive, so I'm just going to place them in the parentheses as addition because they're both positive. The order that you place them in doesn't matter. You could write x plus 3 first, or you could write x plus 5 first. It doesn't matter. Finally, what you want to do is you want to check. You always want to check your factors, and here's how we're going to check them. Remember I said factoring is undoing a multiplication. So we can check it by multiplying it out, foiling it out, and making sure that it comes back to the original trinomial. So let's FOIL it out. X times x is x squared. x times 5 is 5x, 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 5 is 15. You're going to combine the like terms, and it does indeed come back to the original, so you know it's right. All right, next, let's try another example. So you're going to set up your two sets of parentheses, and place x as the first term for each one of the parentheses. For step 2, we got to find the factors of c that add up to b. So let's list all the factors of 35. So obviously 35 and 1, 7 times 5, and that's pretty much it. Now, I need the factors of 35 that add up to negative 2, right? Remember, they got to multiply to this, and they have to add up to this. But this is a negative 35. And I know that the only way that these numbers could multiply to give me a negative is if one of them is negative. So I'm going to put 7 and 5 here, because I know I'm going to use 7 and 5. One of them has to be negative, though, because they have to multiply to negative 35. But which one do I make negative? It does matter which one you make negative. That absolutely matters. And here's how you decide. You know that these two numbers have to add up to negative 2. So let's think about it, right? If I make this positive, don't write that down yet. If I make that positive and I make this negative, what's 7 plus negative 5? What is 7 plus negative 5? That's positive 2. That's not going to work because it's supposed to add up to negative 2, not positive 2. So I can't make that positive and I can't make that negative. I need to make this one negative and I'll make this one positive. Now they will add up to negative 2. Negative 7 plus 5 is indeed negative 2. Okay, and that's pretty much how you do it. You definitely want to check, and I'll leave that up to you to check it and correct me if I'm wrong or commend me if I'm right. I hope this video helps. Take care.